On screen right now are two very different miniatures. Now I'm sure you can tell the difference between which one you prefer and which one you don't, and you can probably tell the difference between which one was done the fastest and which one was done the slowest. The red one is from a previous video of ours. It's been done using speed paints, contrast, slap chop, all of that stuff at furious speed, with just a tiny bit of time spent at the end going towards kind of detailing the eyes and the face and stuff like that. The other one, however, has no contrast. It's got edge highlighting, it's got black lining between the different sections. You can tell where something starts and something ends. It's very clean, it's very crisp. There's blending on it, and overall it's just taken a lot longer, and I mean a lot longer than the other one. So on the one hand, we have furious speed and all-out efficiency, and on the other hand, we have a much heavier leaning towards kind of quality, patience, getting things right, and getting a very crisp and precise end result. Now, I don't think at least there's going to be much debate between what is the better paint job. While you might prefer like the red to the olive or something like that, one of them is kind of objectively done cleaner and crisper and neater, and the other one is a little bit more slapdash. We've got all-out efficiency, and then we've got a much heavier leaning towards quality. But which of these is right for you? And what is the difference actually between this, and this? And maybe there's another one. What we've actually done with the slower one is we've painted it in 4 distinct parts, or kind of 3 parts, I guess you could say. We've got a flat base coat, which is very clean at the beginning. Then we've added washes, not contrast. This is old school painting. Then we've started highlighting that, and we've highlighted it even further. So you've got base, wash, first highlights, fancy highlights, and kind of detailing, I guess. Believe it or not, we can take some things from the faster one and we can apply them to the slower one, and more surprisingly, there are some faster aspects to the slower method than you have in slap chop. What we're going to do in this video is going to weigh up both of these, and we're going to break down the slow old school method, and from that you might be able to pull and glean some really useful information that you can apply to your painting. Let's go. Okay, so how have we got this ultra clean, crisp, base coated plus look? Essentially what we've done is we've just base coated and we've left the undercoat color. This would be called black lining if it was black, but there, he was base coated a dark brown, which is just brown and black mixed. So I guess you call it brown lining, which doesn't sound nearly as crisp or nice. The sacrifice is, if you're doing this, you just got to do a few steps in order to achieve the color that you're after. So unless you're using a color that is specifically made for fantastic coverage, it's probably going to look something like this. I've just accepted this and I'm leaning into it. There are a few ways around it. So you can do 2 coats of everything. Because I have to manually base coat anyway, I'm carefully leaving the lines around the edge of my details, and that's where we're getting that clean separation from, as well as the circles on his robes. You could absolutely skip this and just let the wash pull there. Entirely up to you, whatever you want to go for. Probably only going to take 2 coats of most modern paints, but if you want them a little bit lighter or brighter, maybe you could go over a slightly lighter base coat. You won't get as stark brown lining. Sounds dreadful, doesn't it? If that is the case though. So your other option is to do one of 2 things. You can pick a strong color and base coat, or you can mix a strong light color in with your paint for a first step and then just use the paint pure for a second step. So you could do something like this. That's just more gus bone. Here's hard missing stuff. Old school painting. So if you did do a light base coat, then in theory, you should be able to get really decent coverage with your second coat. Either way is fine though, up to you, and obviously you can choose super high coverage colors as a way around this. I use my fist on the shield, and in 2 coats that's going to be absolutely fine obviously, but you might want to be brighter, and the lighter base coat is a way to achieve that. So for the young'uns amongst you might be wondering, what is old school about this painting, and why don't Games Workshop teach this way of painting as much anymore? And the answer is quite simple, and it's kind of product based. So Games Workshop's base range was originally called Foundation paints, and they were fantastic. When they came out, they were the first paints that GW had brought out that were geared towards heavy coverage, perhaps with colors that previously hadn't had really good coverage. So Mephiston Red has really good coverage, reds don't often have very good coverage. And then kind of at the same time with this, and a nice counter to that lack of color in the colors, was they brought out their washes, which were fantastic. These are now called shades, and you could put these over the top of those slightly lighter desaturated paints, and they give you a little bit of depth and color, and they'd also pull in the recesses. So obviously we're going pretty slowly here. One of the things you can do to speed this up the most is just to base coat all over and not bother with a black lining, or to put the black lines in afterwards or something else like that. That makes a really big difference, but I'm kind of committing fully to the technique and doing it old school and slow and careful. You might be noticing that from, even though stage 1, the base coat is pretty slow, it looks good from stage one. And this is very different to contrast painting, where until really you're kind of finished or you're 80% done, things don't look that good. You could kind of stop here. You could kind of stop at the shades that I'm beginning to put on now. And that's one of the nicer things that's very different about this technique, because you're neat and precise from the beginning. Whilst it is a little bit more laborious, your minis also look pretty good from the beginning, and you get a very good indication of what they're going to look like when they're finished as well, because you're just enhancing a solid base, literally base paint, that you've put down from the start. In this example on the green, I actually put some sepia in with the green that I've used on the camo colored cloak. I really shouldn't have done that, and it meant that I had to kind of counter my own darkening of that area by highlighting more, so I could have saved myself the effort there, definitely. Do what I say, not what I do. All right, so now onto the hard bit. You have quite a lot of decisions here. You could go for edge highlighting. You could go for, see this line that's reflecting here, highlighting it like it's lit by the sun. You could just put it where the wash isn't, which very often will be the same as edge highlighting, for example here. And that's just going to be down to personal preference. You can mix them as well. So let's say this. We should have really good coherency because we're just repeating the color that we already had. Right, so you could go edges and then also put a highlight where the light would be coming from. Completely up to you. You could do nothing. That is an option also. So yeah, it's up to you how you want to do this, but I'm going to be doing a little bit of both. I'm going to be following the guidelines of the wash and probably just doing it a little bit old school. So mostly like what sticks out is going to get highlighted. And I'm going to concentrate on a brush control, maybe get a smaller one out. I'm using a 2 currently. But yeah, we're going to go all the way around this and see how it looks after a first pass at least. I didn't need a smaller brush, I just needed to not be on camera. See if I can do an all right job. It's always a bit more of a struggle, isn't it? It's really hot in the UK as well, so things are drying out quite fast. Including the tip of my brush. You could of course go mega bold with these highlights and do what might be a final step right now. Nothing wrong with that, and it'll look pretty high impact on a tabletop as well. Any particularly detailed areas like backs of hands and whatever, it's always worth taking your time on and just following the guides. Gone too light like I have there, then you can just kind of gently shift it over in another direction by highlighting over it with a dark version of the color. If you've washed twice, this is more likely to happen, right? So there's a doubly efficient reaping of benefits if you do just wash once and then highlight once, because you won't have made it comparatively more dark. So you don't need to highlight it as much. And you'll get quite a bright final result that looks quite cool as well. Maybe not as high contrast, but it'll look very, very coherent. It'll be quite quick. Now, one thing you can't escape, but will definitely get rewarded for, is just highlighting your little wormy tails. So I think I'm just going to block in every single section of this. Easier off camera, but yeah, slow and steady, every bit, you will be rewarded. All right, so null oil first. This is optional, and it's kind of just mixing up the order in which you do things, I guess. Any shield with vertical slats, there's a really good chance that you'll be rewarded for just shading them towards the bottom, so not much effort. I'm just going to do that a couple of times, and then I'll paint the raised red areas. You can see that taking effect. Not even added any more to my brush, just... You can do this before or after. Either way is fine, really, but I'm doing it before. Okay, so once you've gone around and you've done your just kind of base coat that's been repeated, you have some decisions to make about what you'd highlight with and where. We're going to be following the guidelines that we set with our first step. You can see areas like this have been highlighted on the fold. Here, I've just got water on brush so I can show you. Where it points upwards and is lighter, so we're kind of following those guidelines. If you're edge highlighting, could be your edges, but what we're going to use as far as a highlight color goes. So I've got some options here, and these are the types of things I would consider. I couldn't find my Vallejo Ice Yellow, which is one of my favorites, but I do have some very comparable ones. So these are all off-white. They're all great, by the way. All these fantastic. Here is an Ice Yellow equivalent. You could be using something like Never Far Away, Screaming Skull, or you could be doing something fairly creative and using another light color. You only need to be adding a small bit of it to your existing paints and it'll affect them. Obviously, if you use something like this, they'll go really warm. And if you use something like this, it'll be a little bit more saturated and browny. Up to you. Any pastel color will probably do it. You got to be careful because they'll affect your paint color a lot. So that's your main consideration. If we look at kind of a spectrum of neutral-ish browns, any of these would work. This would obviously be a lot more subtle than this because this is closer to white. You can use different highlight colors, of course. What I'm going to try and do is we shared a starting color, which is that dark black brown, and I'm going to try and share a highlight color all over. Now it's important for me that his robe looks good, so I'm just going to test out how our beautiful olive color looks. That is disgusting. That is sickly. So that is potentially a good option. It might not be light enough to be able to do the skin with. That's consideration. The strength of these paints is worth considering. If you want to get a big, bold edge highlight that's really stark, then a stronger paint will do it better. Okay, the ice yellow works really, really well. That's where we were. That's the color itself. That's very nice. Maybe that's pipped it. Can we do a little test somewhere? Ever so carefully. I think that looks pretty cool. We have a winner. All right, see you now how long this takes. I'll show you the red section because maybe that would be of interest. I'll do at least a little bit on the red. Pink. Less pink. Anything lighter than the color that's underneath will highlight it, so you really don't have to push it too far. Maybe I would want to push to orange here, but I guess we'll find out. That looks all right. A little bit pinky, that's okay. That is it. Final result turned out pretty well. So let's list the characteristics of the speedy method, and that will help describe, because they're the exact opposite, the characteristics of the slower method. So the fast method, we're using contrast, whereas we're obviously not with the other method. You don't need control. You don't have to avoid anything. You just blob it all over, and then things only start slowing down when you do have to paint in the right sections. Whereas we just need control for all of the other paint job pretty much. We're using pre-shading, super speedy. Again, it's an all over technique, no control, and it's going to get us some volumes highlighted in whichever way we choose to do our pre-shading, whether that's with dry brushing or we do it with an airbrush with a zenithal or a spray can. We're using transparency. So we're letting the fact that the paint isn't opaque be a bonus for us, and what is underneath the paint, if it's dark, is going to do not much, and if it's light, it's going to do a lot, and that will punch through the color, so you could get a very light red and a very dark red just by putting down one red over what's underneath, which would be the pre-shading. You can use an old crappy brush. It's helpful if you have like a decent quality hair one at the very least, but you don't have to be using a really, really precise one because it doesn't matter quite so much until you get to the latter stages of the painting. It requires less skill. You don't have to be as precise, and therefore you can go way, way, way faster, and it is much, much, much more forgiving. If you miss bits with a slower approach, you really do get kind of punished for it, and you have to go back and fix them. It's not very forgiving in that sense. With the other one, you can just kind of quickly pop a contrast over the bit that you missed, and it probably doesn't matter because you hit everything all over. So everything that I've said for the slow one is the opposite for the traditional one. But a huge plus of the traditional one is that you will improve your brush control every time you paint, and you can do stuff that the other one just can't do. As ever, a mix is normally the best way to kind of come out between speed and quality, and I would say that's definitely the case with this. What do you think? Let us know your suggestion, and don't forget to check out another piece of Scave and Tide content popping up on your screen right now. Please like, please comment, and give us your suggestions for the next video that we cover. The best suggestion will win a texture palette and a brush set of your choosing. Thank you very much for tuning in. We'll catch you in the next video.